Hello everybody and welcome back to Open Source Tonight. Folks, today what I wanted to talk to you about is a very complicated video series we're going to be entering, and we're going to be going over the fundamentals of being able to build a Linux app from scratch for a novice slash non-programmer. So I'm going to teach you a little bit of Python in today's program. I'm going to show you how to build an extremely simple GUI that does almost nothing just to get you started with the GTK3 toolkit. And then we will do future videos in this series where we go over some of the more complicated stuff. So we'll talk about the GUI stuff here in a minute, but first I want to go over some fundamentals and just help you get started. So let's do that first. First, how do you get Python installed? First, what we're going to do is we're going to, if you're on a Rocky Linux system and places like that, type Python 3 for your package name, a DNF install, okay, in your terminal, and you'll have that. And once we get that done, we're good to go. If you're on Debian-based systems, you can do sudo apt install Python 3. So the package is generally the same, and a lot of systems already ship it. If I recall correctly, I think Rocky and Ubuntu already ship it. So if you're using one of those, you won't have to worry about it. This is VS Code. Now, this is the code editor that I like to use. You do not have to use it if you do not want to, but it's got a lot of really nice autocompletes and stuff to make our life easy. So I'm going to show you how to get it. So we just go to Google and search VS Code. We're going to go to the Microsoft webpage. In my case, I'm using Red Hat-based stuff, so I'm going to use .rpm. If you're on the Debian side of the Linux community, you'll use the deb package. And if you're not on Linux, which I hope you are because this is Linux specific, but there is Mac and Windows builds as well available as well. It's a great open source code editor. You just download your RPM or deb, and you can open it up in your software tool of choice to install it. So in my case, this is the tool right here. And this is GNOME software. You'll see it shipped with a variety of systems. So once you get it installed and you open it up, you can, like I said, just search for it. So like up here, VS Code. Once you do that, though, I'm going to show you how to get an extension. We want an extension. You can just search for it up here, Python. And you want the official Microsoft Python package. So this gives you code highlighting and things like that, better autocomplete, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so let's get started. So we can go ahead and we can create a folder, which is something I always like to do. So let's go ahead and do that. So I have a folder here called Simple App. I've just opened it up, and you want to hit this Yes, I Trust Offers part. You can close the welcome screen. Hit this little icon right here where my mouse is, and you'll be able to create a new file. And I like to call the main file in every folder main.py. I'm going to drag this over like that by clicking on it and dragging it out of the screen. And so we're going to start with some really basic fundamentals of Python before we get into the more technical stuff. So in Python, you can import other components, if you will, other parts of the language, system modules, libraries, and such by using the import command. So for example, a built-in one is called time. So I'll show you that. So we've just imported time. So the syntax, the way you do it is you do import space and the name of whatever you're importing. So in this case, I'm importing time. And so that's very simple. And you can see we have that code highlighting in action. I'm going to make my text a little bigger to make sure everybody can see that. But my text is highlighting here, import, and it's saying here that time is not accessed by the Pylance. Not really sure why this is an error because it is built in, but anyway, we'll ignore that. So the Pylance stuff might be a little buggy here and there. So we have that. So now if we look at our most fundamentals, what can we do? We can do a time.sleep, for example, if we want to wait for something. Then you can put in, say, 1 second. So this right here, when we get to this line of the code, because it runs from top to bottom in Python, it always does. Well, if we're running from top to the bottom, first we're going to say we want to use the time library, module, whatever you want to call it. Then we're going to do a new line. Now, you actually could do this. You don't need a new line. I like to have a new line in places like this just to keep it clean. And then we have time.sleep. So our method is, or function, depending on what you're using, we'll get into that later, is sleep. So in this case, it's a function. If you hover over it, it will tell you. But anyway, this function sleep, we're going to sleep for 1 second. It literally just means to wait. And this, by the way, if you hover over it and you do get this information, that again is your Pylance. Delays the execution for a given number of seconds. The argument may be a floating point number. So you can actually do, what it means by floating point, you can do like 0, 0.001. And so that's like a fraction of a second. But for the sake of right now, let's just say we wait a second. Now, if we run this program right now, it's going to work, but it's literally just going to open, wait a second, and close. It's not going to do anything else. So what is some things that we need to understand that are fundamentally important? So for people coming from like Bash, we have like the echo command that you can use in Bash. Well, in Python, we have something that's kind of similar. We have the print command. And the print command, we just pass it some text and a quote, and it will display it. So I'm going to just say, hello, exclamation point, and I'm going to use Control S to save my changes. And just like that, we have a print. So now what's going to happen if we run this is it's going to import the time module. We're going to have a blank line that will be ignored by the Python system itself, the Python language itself, the interpreter. Then we're going to run the print function, and we're going to just print out whatever we give it. In this case, it's hello. Then we're going to go ahead and skip this line because it's blank, and then we're going to say time sleep 1 second. So you might want to do it more like this. I think that looks a little neater right there where they're both together. Now, what about afterwards? So we can say hello again, exclamation point. Actually, we probably don't need to be a capital A, but there. So we can do hello again, right? And so what's going to happen, like I said, is we'll wait a second, and then we'll do this, and then we'll immediately exit. So let's go ahead and show that. If I run it, you can see it's running here by just clicking this little play button. And just like that, we have hello, and then we have hello again. So if we run it again, hello, and then there it is, hello again displays shortly afterwards, right? So there is a pause. It's not instant. So just to give you an idea, if I comment that out and I run it again, you can see it's instant, that all that happens together. So you can see our time sleep really does actually delay things for us, which can come in handy because sometimes we really do want to actually be able to delay things for a variety of reasons. Whatever the reason may be in your program, doesn't really matter. It's just, it allows you to do it. So anyway, continuing on, now we've got that basic fundamental out there, right? What else can we do? Well, let's talk about making our own function. So right now we just use other people's functions. Well, the way you make a function is you use def, okay? And it's telling me here with the red lines, it's giving me an error saying, hey, you need to have the name of your function after that. So let's put a name. We're going to just call this test FUCT, which is the abbreviation of function. Open, close parentheses like this. And then we can have arguments in this, but for right now, we're not going to have any. Put a colon, a new line, and now I'm going to, whatever's under this indentation right here is actually what's going to run. So I'm going to just put a print again. Actually, let's put all of this under this function, just so I can show you something. Because you can think of a function like almost like a baby program inside of the program. We're going to get rid of all of this. And now if I run this, you're going to see nothing actually happens. Here, let me clear this. If I run it, you'll see nothing happens. It runs, but then it immediately returns and does nothing. Why is that? Because we didn't call this function. We define it. So the interpreter is going to come in here and say import time. Then it's going to do a blank line and ignore it. Then it's going to define this function, but it never actually uses it. So it literally just says, all right, I can use it, but then I never do. So let's actually use it. How do we use it? We're going to come out from the indent here. So like I said, here we're indented. So we're going to come out, and I'm going to just call the function like this. Test underscore FUCT, open close parentheses, and that will actually call our function. So I run it now. You can see the program did the exact same thing we did before, but now it is contained in a function, so it's more portable, it's easier to use, and we could do a lot of stuff with it, okay? So I hope you all are keeping up. I'm trying to keep this low level. I apologize if I'm not the best teacher here, but anyway. Next, what we're going to do is let's talk about our variables. So variables is a big one. Variables is something that we're going to have to deal with at some point as a programmer. If you're used to things like Bash, again, a lot of these things are similar. So in Bash, we do also have the idea of variables, and variables, you can think of them as a bucket, if you will, that holds something. So a bucket could hold water in the real world. Well, in our program, what that bucket is going to actually hold is some data. And so in our case, I'm going to make a variable called name, and it's very easy to make a variable. You just start typing whatever it is, equal sign, and then then we're going to put spaces around that equal to, though that's not actually required, but it just looks better to me. And then we're going to put in our quotes my name. So I'm going to say Vincent. Now, normally you don't usually hard code variables like this, where you actually put them in the code like this, but we're learning. So right now we're going to start off easy. So this variable would be equivalent, if I was to say print it out, to just printing Vincent directly. So that means that, for example, Vincent, like this, is an exact equivalent to this. So these two highlighted here are literally going to give me the exact same result, and I'll show you that by running the code. So if we come down to the bottom here, you can see Vincent, Vincent, both here. Those are two prints. We got the exact same thing. But the advantage of doing it with a variable is that can be changed. We can do some really cool stuff. So that is something that gives you an idea. Now, a variable in Python, it has to have the first character be, I believe it can be an underscore too. Let's see, can it? Yeah, it can be an underscore, but it also can be a letter, but you cannot have a number. You can see it's giving me red. So no numbers. I don't think it can be a period. It cannot. Okay. So you need to use characters A through Z, and it can be all capital or mixed case, right? So I could have this. That's a variable that's valid as well. We're going to set that back. But it is valid to do it that way. Now, you probably wouldn't want to do it that way, but you could. Anyway, we'll talk about some more of this stuff in a future video. So what I'm going to show you next is, let's talk about how we can do some branching, and basically where we can come in here and we can do some logic. So what the logic is let's say that I am trying to have something happen if, say, the variable name is set to a specific person's name. Maybe we're trying to check and see if that someone's name is an approved name to do something, whatever that might be. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to use that variable name and make an if statement here. And let's show you how to do that. All right, so I'm going to just type if, and then what we're going to do is we're going to put our logic in here. So I'm going to do a very simple if name. So we put our variable right after if, and you do want a space here for this. That is required. You want to do 2 equal signs. You can actually do 3, but we won't get into that right now as well for another use case. We're going to put I'm sorry, that wouldn't work. So we're going to say there. So we're going to say if name equals Vincent, then what are we going to do? Now you'll notice it's giving me a squiggly here. That means we got an error. And if you hover over it, it tells you that it expects a colon here, and it does. So we're going to put a colon in a new line, and we can just do enter for our new line. And now that we are setting here on our new line, we can put whatever logic we want here. So what if we made this run only if that this function here will only run if that the name is equal to Vincent up here. So I'm going to disable this, right? This is a comment. So just like in other things like Bash, you can put in a comment. This will not run anymore. And so you could also use this for a note. So for example, I could do test note here, right? And that will work. And that will also be ignored. But you can see this and say, oh, well, whatever. Whatever you wanted to note. So our code, what's going to happen now is it's going to, if we scroll to the top and I go over it again with you, we're going to import time. We're going to skip this line. This function here is going to be defined. We're going to skip all the blank lines again. They will skip the comments as far as running. We're going to set a variable of name to my name in this case. And then we're going to print that. We're going to print that name right there. And then we're going to come down here and run this if statement. If name equals, and that just means if they're the same, because 1 equals up here is to set something, 2 equals is to compare it, and we were trying to do a comparison. So again, here we're going to compare Vincent to name, and if they match, and they have to match exactly, like a lowercase v here, it would not match because this is an uppercase V up here in the variable. So our test function is going to run in this case. So I'm going to open our terminal and show you. And as you can see, we got our test function to run, and everything I showed you happened just as we expected. So again, in that sense, we are on the same page, right? So we've gone over a lot of the fundamentals, the really basic fundamentals of actually creating our program. Again, a very basic program. So again, we went over a lot of that. So another thing I'm going to just come in here and talk about for a minute is you want these files to end in .py. That's something you want to do. So again, at this point we have, didn't mean to do that there, but we actually have a basic program now. And like I said, I can scroll around and I can look at it, I can run it, you know, it all works. So at this point, we are at a stage now where that we really understand, hopefully, some of the basics. So as far as indentation goes, I'm just going to touch on that a little bit because I have kind of glossed over it a little bit before. You can use the tab key to do indentation or the space key. Now, I personally, these days, am a tab guy. I find it's just easier. So for example, if I wanted to come under this right here, this function, well, where I am right now, this is not going to run inside this function because my mouse cursor is right on the edge. But if I hit tab once, now I'm officially under the function and whatever I type here will actually work, right? And so that's a really important thing when it comes to indentation. And if I actually indent incorrectly something, so I'm going to indent a print statement here that's going to be not working correctly to say test, you can see it's yelling at me, unexpected indentation. So if I run this, we're going to get an error from Python itself saying, hey, I can't run that. I don't know where that's supposed to run in sequence. But if I hit my backspace key, so I'm only tabbed once instead of twice, now we're going to see that that worked. It indented correctly. And because it was indented correctly, I should say it worked and actually did what we want. So this is going to give you some of the most basic fundamentals of the language right here. Again, we're talking about really, really bare bones basics today. This just gives you a tiny idea of what's going on. So I know that I did say at the beginning of the video, we're going to talk about a GUI, and this is a bit of an advanced topic. So I'm doing this to show you what's possible. We're really probably not at a stage yet as training you for you to be really ready to use this, but I'm going to just show you just to kind of give you an idea of what we can do once we get a little more advanced. So you don't need to necessarily follow along with this part, but again, this is just to kind of keep your interest because I find it's fun to jump ahead a little bit sometimes. So I'm going to come over to my documentation here, and I'm going to just show you this really simple example GUI. So this is a GTK GUI. And this is going to produce a window here that doesn't do much of anything. Now, it's telling me here that this cannot be imported. And as far as I know, I have this installed, but we'll double check that. If it isn't, we'll have to install everything. But the point of the matter is this is going to give us a blank GUI. So I actually am just going to put a button in here real quick, and that's all we're going to do. So we're going to do GTK add and GTK dot button. Again, we will go over the way this works in a future video. I just wanted to show you what's possible real quick, right? So we're going to call this click me. Okay. And now if I run it, let's see here. Interesting. I'm not really sure. We may need to run this in a terminal. Like a direct terminal. So yeah, that's what it was. Okay. So this button clicks, you know, the window loads, it's really basic, and we can close it and it exits. So that is something, you know, again, we'll work up to being able to make a GUI like that and understand some of the fundamentals that are necessary to do some GUI development. That will be in a future video, everybody. I thank you so much for watching this video. Please stay tuned for future videos in this series. And until next time, everybody, thanks for watching Open Source Tonight. I appreciate your viewership. Thanks for watching, and goodbye. And action.